Hello everyone and welcome to this demonstration, and what we're going to discuss today is the topic of eBuild, where we will automatically generate the ePlan project and the schematics therein. So the exciting part about ePlan platform, or ePlan Electric P8 2026, is that P8 2026 now includes eBuild automatically. So if you want to follow along, you can find the macros and projects I'm using if you go to the ePlan engineering standard. And what I'm using as my basis is the basic project for IEC and macro project for schematic blocks. So what I've done is I've downloaded those and put them in my templates folder. So yeah, if you want to follow along, you can also download those, okay? So let's get started by creating a new macro project based on that template. So here's our macro project. We're also going to create a project based on our basic project just so we have an idea of what's included, and then we can adjust things accordingly. Okay, so here we'll find our IEC basic project. Let's look. We'll keep this open for reference. Now let's look at this macro project. And what I want to do is change this EES into something else. So what I can do is go into Tools, Structure Identifiers. What I'm going to do here is we're going to remove the change protection. Click that until the manual protection is gone and hit apply, and we're going to just type in eBuild here and hit apply, and that should change everything and all the sub identifiers. Now you can see everything is named off of eBuild, so that's great. Now I want to make a page template here, so I'm going to right click on machine building and we're going to make a blank page template. So I'm going to call this page template, leave that blank, multi-line, and then we'll just call this multi-line page. Okay, so in the page template for eBuild, the only thing we really need for this, what we're doing now, is just an empty macro box. And then we're going to associate a placeholder object with this macro box. Page properties, let's make sure we spell right. Then we're going to add page description. Okay, great, so we have that. We have page description in place, so we have our page template. Okay, so let's take a look at this motor macro here. So what we want to do is modify this just a little more to make it more modular. So what I want to do is make a macro for just the power rails. So I'm going to make a new page. We're going to name this rails variant A, rails continuing, and then variant B will be rails ending, right? We're going to go to that motor macro and we're going to copy this stuff here. We're not going to worry about the connection definition points necessarily. Okay, so we're going to take those, put them over here. We're going to also go to variant B, paste them, and then we're going to just delete that. So for variant A, let's insert a macro box. And we're going to use this page structure as our guideline for the naming. Okay, so that's how you would name it manually. I'm going to use the macro utility script to do it automatically next. If you want to use the script, you're going to want to reach out to your ePlan consultant to get this script. It's not available to the public, but if you work with us in consulting, we'll hand it over. So I'm going to go ahead and name that automatically, and now if you look here, it does all that for me. I'm going to set the display so it shows all that stuff. I can see that with the invisible stuff turned on. Okay, Let's toggle that. So we have our rails. Great. Let's go back to the motor macro, and what we're going to do is delete the rails from this one. And then I'm going to make a variant C for this macro here. We're just going to call it ending. And all this is going to be is some angles where these T nodes were. We're going to place a macro box, name it. Do the same for this one. And then we're going to go back to our page template, and I'm going to name this macro with the script, right? With the macro utility. Okay, so this macro is just called multi-line page. Great. So let's go ahead and get started. So now let's open our library design. This is also known as the eBuild designer. And we're going to make a new library. We'll call it eBuild macro getting started. Yeah, open editing version. Before we do that, let's actually look at these settings. We're only going to use function designation, location, and document type. We're not using ladder logic since this is an IEC schematic. Okay, so I've removed all my languages besides English. Now let's say open, let's save it, and open the editing version. Okay, so we're inside of our library. We've set up all of our settings. We have our macro navigator open here on the right. If you don't know where the macro navigator is, it's here under master data macro navigator, okay? So you have to use this. It has to be open. Let me go ahead and move myself somewhere else so I'm not in the way necessarily. Let's put it down here, or let's put me up there. I'll move it as necessary. We need a macro typical. This is the fundamental basic building block for everything. Let's do this also. Can I make myself smaller? Okay. Macro typical. Let's create one. We'll call it MT motor. And what are we going to add to this macro typical? Well, we have to use our macro navigator, and we're going to start with our page template. We have to find the variant, and then we first add it. Okay, so yep, now let's add our other macros. So we need our rails, A and B, highlight both, and add. And motor. We're going to add variant A and variant C. We never really finalized or used variant B. We never renamed it, so that's why it's not showing under this structure. In any case, there's all the macros, so we can hide that for now. Okay, yeah, so let's look at the page properties here. Status, always dependent. That's definitely what we need for the page template. Let's fill out the page structure. Location, we'll call it A1. So getting started, we see that for electrical schematics, we're using EFS1. So let's use that for our document type. Page name and function will be dynamic. So let's get back to those in 1 second. Page description, I'll just put equals motors inside a single quote since it's a string. Now let's add a configuration variable. We're going to add one for function designation. We're going to add one for page name. And I'm also going to add one called last. And we're going to make last, we're going to make this one a Boolean. You'll see why in just a second, okay? Back to the page properties, let's make function designation based on that configuration variable, likewise page name. Okay, so let's think about the other stuff. Let's go to Rails here and preview it. Remember, this is our continuing Rails. So we need this if it's not the last motor, right? So we're going to make this dependent on equals not last. That's what the exclamation point does there. It says not last, okay? Let's preview this one. Okay, this will be for the last one, so we'll make that the dependency. Now let's look at this. This is the variant of the motor that's always there, variant C. We need these ending angles if it's the last, so for the dependency we'll type equals last, okay? Great. So let's take one more look. Everything looks good for all that. So now let's go make a typical group. We're going to call this TG motors. Okay, and we're going to add our macrotypical MT motor into this. And we're going to allow instances. That way we can create a dynamic quantity of these. Let's say we have a limited number of 8. That's our limit. Function designation, we want this to be dynamic. So I want the first motor to be MA1 and the last one to, let's say, be MA8 if there's 8 of them. Okay? Based on the fact that we allow instances, we'll have some new internal variables. You can see those here. One of them would be index, for example. Index starting at our first instance of our macrotypical would start at 0. So I'm going to add that to 1 and put it in parentheses. And we're going to add the string MA to that plus parentheses index plus 1. Page name we can leave as 1 because the function designation is unique for all of those. And this is technically a string, so let's put that in single quotes. Last equals the internal variable of last, which means the last instance. Okay, so now let's create a configurator. Test motors. Let's add in our typical group to that configurator. Okay, one more thing I want to check is let's go back to our macrotypical. Let's make sure there's no other variables that need to be set. You can see these are all inherited from the page, so that's fine. Here at our motor macro, we have this variable for the 3 phases. Let's just set it to L1 through L3. Okay? Okay, so now let's go to the project generation. Pick your library. If there's any versions, you can select published version. We did not publish any version yet. You can publish a version if you go back to the library homepage. You can publish a new version, so let's try that out. Go back to the project builder. Let's close that and reopen it. Select that. Let's choose version 1. Let's make a new project. Getting started with eBuild. Okay, something like that. Template, select your template. This is the one I downloaded earlier from the Eplan Engineering Standard. Select your storage location. Create. Select our configurator. There's the typical group in the configurator. Let's select 4 motors. There's no additional options. If we wanted to make it more advanced, perhaps we can build in horsepower selection under each motor, but we did not take it that far. So let's hit generate and see the result. And let's take a look. Here's our project. MA1, here's our first motors page. MA2, MA3, those should all be identical, and then once you get to MA4, you'll see now it cuts off because it's the last one. There's your ending interruption points and angles rather than T-nodes. So this is a rather basic example. There's a lot more complex things that you can handle within eBuild. Of course, for those topics, I'd recommend reaching out and scheduling some consulting for more complex examples within eBuild, okay? Thank you for watching.